Hungry Trilobyte podcast would like to start by acknowledging SoonerCon. Set sail once again for the high seas of Oklahoma's longest-running pop culture convention. A fun weekend awaits you full of cosplay, shopping, celebrity autographs, panels, and the after-hours events. Set up in the Embassy Suites in Norman, Oklahoma, you'll find a fantastic geeky weekend, June 19th through 21st, 2026. Visit SoonerCon.com for details.
Welcome to today's episode of the Hungry Trilobyte podcast. My name is Aaron Bossig, and I'm going to be your host. Today we're welcoming Nick Edwards to the show, and Nick has a fantastic project on Kickstarter right now. We don't have much more time before this project is no longer available, so I'm going to jump into it right now.
Here we have Nick Edwards. How are you doing today, good sir?
I'm doing great, Aaron. Thanks for having me on.
Glad to do it. You have a Kickstarter live right now. By the time this hits the feed, there should still be about 3 days and change left. So I would encourage anybody listening to it to check it out as we're talking about it, because your time is limited. But when I was looking over this, I was saying, okay, I like comic books. I like indie projects. What's the story here? And the first thing I saw was that you asked a goal of $1,500.
That is correct. Yeah.
Which is for like the smallest goal I've ever seen for anything that wasn't like stickers.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Really?
And that's a good thing, because that shows that you have it planned down to the penny as to what you need to deliver this project to the audience. You're not aiming high, you're not padding it. You are just putting out, you know exactly what you need to deliver. And how did you get there?
Yeah, so this is my third Kickstarter to do, and this is also the Kickstarter with the lowest minimum funding goal that I've done so far. And I did that for a couple of reasons. One, I just saw a decrease in dollars pledged from between my first one and my second one. So I kind of assumed that might happen again with this one. And then I planned on, because this one is also a little bit shorter than the two previous ones I'd done in the past. My first two Kickstarters, first one was for a book called Gator Man Kills, and the second one was for a book called Stilettos. Both of those I worked on with my buddy Scott Beecher. Those were both full-fledged graphic novels, so around 90 pages each, plus extra goodies and things like that. And for both of those, we decided to do a true bound books, like a trade paperback, really. And so this one, The Apostasy, I knew going into it was going to be shorter. It ended up being 48 pages of art, and I also knew that for this one I was probably just going to do a staple book, so that just the size of the physical book itself, that cuts down on printing costs pretty severely. But also, I mean, times are tough out there, man. I mean, like people are tightening the belt kind of in a lot of different aspects of life. And, indie comics, it takes a lot to ask somebody to, support any kind of creative endeavor nowadays and put their hard-earned money towards it. And I think that goes double for a very niche thing like indie horror comics, right? And so I did want to make it as accessible to folks as I could, while also setting, a realistic, attainable goal for myself in this campaign.
Sure. And not only was your goal low, but the entry point for each individual pledge is also very low. When I look at these things, I always look at what's the lowest amount that actually gets me the thing that's promised. And in your case, that's $10.
Yeah.
That gets you the digital comic. 15 gets you the physical one. And I expect to see like the physical thing start at about $20. So again,
Mhm.
you're really going out of your way to get it in your customers' hands.
Yeah, exactly. And then, I just in the spirit of full disclosure, right? That's $15 plus seven for shipping and stuff like that. So,
Fair,
for
fair.
if people are going for like the bare minimum of like let's get a physical book in the hands, it's going to run you about $22, which I mean, uh, I feel like a standard size trade paperback, as a consumer, as like a comics reader and a comics buyer, that's around $20 is typically what I am willing to pay for like a standard size trade paperback, maybe a little bit more if it's like pretty long, or if it's, a project that I'm just like really excited about. But again, I really did want to make it accessible for folks. Again, just times are tough right now, man. It's crazy out there.
Yeah, and I'm doing you a bit of a disservice by glossing over the story itself,
Yeah.
because I honestly don't know a whole lot about the story,
Mhm.
but I'm looking over the art style and what you're invoking because of it. I don't want to give spoilers, but I do want to kind of get into why you decided this project had to get off the ground.
Yeah, so like I said, the book is called The Apostasy, and the super quick pitch, the 3 second pitch is Lone Wolf and Cub set in hell. And to get into a little bit longer, I guess maybe how I got the idea really to write it. The book's drawn by a guy named Dave Schuler, who is an awesome dude and a really, really talented artist. And so I met Dave at an arts festival outside of Pittsburgh back a couple of years ago, back in fall 2022. And he was a vendor at this art festival, and so he had a bunch of his stuff on display, and I was immediately drawn to it. It was super creepy and freaky and weird in all the best ways, and it really, just spoke to me. And so I just, went up to him and I was like, "Dude, your art is sick." And we just started talking, and I mentioned, I was like, "Hey man, I write, some comics, do some indie stuff. If you ever wanted to draw a book?" And he had done a story in an anthology previously, but that was it. And so, we just decided to stay in contact after that. And so I wrote the script pretty shortly after meeting him. And I knew that I wanted to write something that would play to his strengths as an artist and would, involve scary creatures and freaky hellscapes and violence and things like that. And I'm also a horror geek at heart, right? So these kind of stories are very comfy to me. So that is kind of the genesis of how the apostasy came about. And so yeah, like I said, Lone Wolf and Cub set in hell. The story follows a demon named Gainsbourg, who for eons has worked as a torturer in the deepest circle of hell, the ninth circle of hell. So he scourges the souls of the damned uh, for a living, really. And the story is really about what happens when a character like that encounters a soul that he doesn't believe deserved to be there. And in this case, it's the soul of a 12-year-old girl named Katie. And so that those two kind of are our lone wolf and our cub dynamic, and they decide to, rely on each other in search for maybe answers why she's there, possible maybe way for her to get out of this situation. And it takes them through hell and with all sorts of freaky characters that, they meet along the way.
There's a huge philosophical question there as far as, if you believe in an afterlife, you believe in a possibility of damnation, and if you accept that as true, is there a way back from even that? And that the answer to that are have been debated since the beginning of time, but it's interesting that you think you actually can create a narrative that navigates that very well.
Well, I think too, and absolutely no, just I think with my own worldview is, religion, it does not play a big part in my life. And so I am able to kind of look at things like heaven and hell like fantasy, right? Because
Mhm.
to me they are. And so I think being able to detach from the notion of an afterlife and all of the spiritual ramifications of that, and just and kind of view it through a lens of it's just, horror fantasy, I think helped me in some way.
Oh, for sure, for sure. I
Yeah.
mean, if you can separate yourself from the obligation to feel like it has a truth to you internally,
Hmm.
if you don't have to feel like you have to shoehorn any sort of belief system and just tell a good story, that's probably going to be the best story possible.
Right. I always think about when the Wachowskis made The Matrix.
Hmm.
One of their chief sources of inspiration were the Gospels from the New Testament of the
Hmm.
Bible. And about a small kind of ragtag group of people who went against the grain, like resisted because of a savior figure that they believed in, right? And I think I probably share a lot of their point of view with that, of like spiritually, that may not mean much to me, but narrative wise, that's a super compelling story, right?
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
and, and so I find that I find that a lot, honestly, in the Bible and other spiritual texts. And I'm not sure if you can hear me, there are some of those sirens I mentioned earlier, but because I grew up in the South. I'm from the Dallas, Texas area, and I went to a Christian high school growing up and everything, and was very much, you know, soaked in Bible culture, right? And went and my relationship with that changed throughout my life and everything. And so I do think there are a lot of rich narrative seeds that can be plumbed from a lot of those texts, regardless of one's personal spiritual relationship with them.
Hmm. And I'm a firm believer in the thing that the what serves a story best is what serves a story best. It's what you need to tell whatever character development, whatever journey you're trying to show, and trying to impose from a sense of duty some greater message can get in the way of that. Like I love a good horror story too. I mean, I'm not a horror fan, but I love playing with the genre, and that's partially just because I love playing with the idea of what it means to be afraid. And
Mhm.
sometimes the things that would scare me, I hope aren't real. Trust me, I really hope they're not. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I'm the same way. Like I hope demons aren't real. If demons are real, that's freaky as hell, man. Like if these are like supernatural entities around there torturing the souls of the damned, is there like any idea scarier than that? Like the idea of like you die and then you spend eternity just like getting destroyed, getting annihilated by these like evil beings. Like that's horrible. That's like it's crazy to think about. And so I think with this story, I take like those like very fantastical ideas, right? And then I kind of mismatch them with in my mind something that's like very, very ordinary, which is like just going to work, because this character Gainsbourg, he works as a torturer, and I had a little fun with it because like he's union. Like he and like there are pictures on the wall in the torture emporium where he works at of like torturer of the month, right? And so
Mhm.
it's like that mix of like the really shocking and fantastical, but also the like very banal and like very familiar, which was fun to write.
And I almost want to wonder, because you're putting the demons into this role of like it's just a job, it's just a living, and that's kind of cool because one comes along and they discover this person who doesn't necessarily deserve to be there, and there's the temptation to say, well, my job is to do this, and I'm going to do this, and whatever. You don't question it, and then that somebody says, no, maybe I shouldn't be doing this way. Maybe I have to question the job, even though that's going to make me very unpopular.
And I mentioned that Gainsbourg is a character. He's been doing this for like untold eons, right? And the idea was like that he's the star, right? Like he's really good at it, and it's kind of like one of his favorite things to do. And so a fun question is like, what if you got to do your favorite thing every day, all day for eternity? And like, would you eventually get tired of it? Like, would you eventually lose your lust for it? Would you eventually grow, like chafe against your existence, right? And so I think we meet Gainsbourg when he's kind of in that headspace a little bit. And so then you throw in something like this that like really shakes things up for him. And I don't know, seeing how that unfolds was just a fun part of this project.
It plays with the idea of eternity too, because just like you said, if you get to do the best thing ever every day for, until the end of time, then would you get bored of it? And we always pitched that as being a good thing, that if you could possibly live forever, and yet there's a certain idea that maybe it wouldn't be a good thing. And then you have to ask, well, what's the alternative for that?
I think that being immortal or living forever would be the biggest curse. I personally I would hate it. Um, I think what makes the human experience so special is that it is finite and that it ends. And so, then the responsibility is on us as human beings, right? We get one life. We have a set number of days in this earth, and how can we I don't know, how can we make an impact while we're here? And I think making an impact that'll mean different things for different people. For some people want to change the world. Some people just want to be kind to those in their life, and I think those are maybe equally as important in a way. But just what can we do, and how can we make advantage of the limited time that we have in this world? Because in my mind, that's kind of all we get.
And for at least a little slice of the life you've been given, you decided putting this comic out there in the world was something that you wanted to do. That this
Hmm.
would, and I think that's going to be a good thing. And I'm sorry, I genuinely want to apologize if I put any words in your mouth here,
Oh my gosh,
or
no.
no, or if
Yeah.
I've assumed something of your work that's not there because I haven't read it. But I love the
Yeah.
concept.
No, no, you do not owe me any sort of apology at all in my mind. Yeah, no, definitely not.
But I mean, it's a 48-page book, which is
Mhm.
basically a double-length regular comic. If it
Yeah,
was, it's the annual from one of your superhero stories.
right. Yeah, it's
Right.
it's a giant size. It's an annual. Exactly. Yeah, 48 pages.
But not like a huge tome that you're going to be able to put a lot of lore into. It's not a grand epic. It's just a standard hefty comic. So
Hmm.
whatever you get into this has to be able to pack a heck of a punch in a relatively small number of pages.
Hmm. And I wrote it, yeah, 48 pages. So I actually wrote it as kind of in a fun exercise for myself too, of just working on telling more concise stories. I wrote it as 8 6-page chapters. So I really focused on, all right, how can I tell this story in 6 pages? And then how can I tell this next part of the story in 6 pages? And so giving myself those constraints, and that's one of the things that I love about writing comics is like in my mind, the first step that you need to figure out is simply how long is your story going to be? And then once you have an idea of like the amount of space that you have to play with, then you see where the different narrative beats fall and everything. So yeah, here for a good time, not for a long time, right?
And let's talk about the storytelling there, because a lot of it does boil down to the art by David Schuler. And
Hmm.
the art that I'm seeing here, I really enjoy the fact that it is a very illustrative art that is not that there's not an attempt to make it. I mean, it's classic comic book art. It's very well done. It is not over processed art. It is hand drawn. Simply, is there a certain did you the two of you put together this art style intentionally, or did it just come out of what you thought the story needed?
Uh, no, so basically I had an idea of Dave's style, and I just kind of told him to like I because I knew how he draws and the kind of art that he makes. I knew I just wanted it to look like his art, which was really great. And there were a few moments in the script that, like, it's a story about demons, right? And they look freaky. And I, would introduce these characters into the script, and I would either keep my descriptions in the script to like the absolute bare minimum, or I like wouldn't describe these characters at all. And a few times I would even note in the script like, Dave, have fun with this guy, go crazy. And I would get to see that come to life, and that was so cool, right? Because that's him getting to have fun and kind of just, let it fly. That to me, I love how comics are a team sport, and how, especially with the writer artist dynamic, it's a lot of give and a lot of take. And so getting to see his expression through these pages was really cool.
It is a really, really cool thing when that dynamic goes back and forth. And, there are probably moments where you have the story in your head and you have a visual, and, David takes over, does his thing, delivers the visuals, and you're like, okay, this is what it's going to be from here on out. You've upgraded your own creation in your mind, and that's a lot of trust to give another artist to say, okay, I've gotten the story this far. You need to take the rest of the way. And once the two of you are done, then it belongs to the audience.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I think as a comic book writer, if you aren't going to draw the pages yourself, you kind of have to trust your artist in that way. Like I think seeing Dave's art, I maybe had for the whole book, maybe two or three very small minor notes, but a lot of the times it was just to clarify something. But like I hear horror stories about writers who, like, when you have such a specific vision in your head, that then you're just giving note after note after note, and like at some point that kind of relationship just becomes untenable. And I'm also a believer that, like, people will sit through a subpar script to look at really great art, but no, when they're reading a comic or a graphic novel, but like no one is going to like sit through subpar art or bad art to read even like the greatest script ever. So like the art has to be there first and foremost. I mean, this is a graphic medium at the end of the day. So I tend to defer to the artist unless it is something that like I really like is make or break for the story in my mind.
I mean, there's going to be a moment here or there where, yeah, you say this has to be this way because this, and I'm sure a good artist would look at that note and say, oh yeah, okay, thanks for telling me. But I
Yeah.
mean, at some point, you have to realize it's not that way because you needed to be that way. It's that way because you just had. It sounds like you two just have a great working relationship, and you only have known each other a few years. You say?
Yeah. Yeah, we met in late 2022. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Excellent. Well, I want to make sure again, I'm going to put the links to this in the show notes on my website, aaronbossig.com. Uh, where can people follow you and where can people follow Nick and all of your adventures on the web?
Or
You
so
and David, rather.
Yeah, no, all good, all good. It's short white guy names are always like super interchangeable. So like you call me Nick, Dave, Matt, Bob, whatever. But so I and my buddy Scott Beecher, who I did my first two graphic novels with, we run our own independent label, Unearthly Comics. So you can follow us at on Instagram at Unearthly Comics, all one word, all lowercase, no spaces, no underscores, anything like that. We have the Unearthly Comics publisher page on Global Comics, which is a really great site. That's where we house all of our books digitally, Global Comics. And then we've got our website too, www.unearthlycomics.com. And as far as Dave goes, you should if you just he posts his stuff on Instagram all the time, and his handle there is at Uncouth Barbarian, which is a very cool social media username. So give Dave a follow too. He's awesome.
Awesome. Well, again, all that's going to be linked on there. Thank you so much for joining us here. I will be glad to follow up with you when this thing is out.
Awesome. Awesome. Thanks a lot, Aaron. Thanks for having me.
Have a great night.
You too.
I would like to thank Nick for being my guest today, and I would like to thank you for listening. If you're listening to this right off the feed, we are about to hit Thanksgiving of 2025. And I have to tell you, Thanksgiving is one of my favorite holidays. Not only do I appreciate the fact that we're supposed to express gratitude for the good things in our lives and maybe turn our attention toward making the world a better place, but Thanksgiving also ties into one of my favorite genre shows, Mystery Science Theater 3000. And I'm going to encourage you to go back into the archives and check out different episodes I've recorded with people who come from that universe. People like Mary Jo Pehl, people like Rebecca Hansen, Frank Conniff, or people who've been on them in the movies, things like Arch Hall Jr. or Jackie Ray Naaman Jones, and many, many others who are connected to the Mystery Science Theater world, the fan base, and the people that chart the history of it. I could go on and on, but I'm going to encourage you to go take a look into those archives of Hungry Trilobyte. You can check that out on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, on YouTube, or just touch base with me at Aaron Bossig on Instagram or Blue Sky. Thanks so much, and we'll see you next time. Watch out for snakes.